Hi, this is Jack Stanley. I had a few more things I wanted to mention about the beginnings of electrical recording. You see, with any company that makes records, be it Victor, Columbia, Edison, be it the Gramophone Company, the Columbia Company of, Odeon, etc. All of these companies, all of these massive corporations that made entertainment recordings, would record many records in advance and then release them over time. Columbia would make recordings and release them sometimes over a long period of time. And the same for Victor at times, especially when you get into the 1920s and 30s, when they started dredging and pulling out recordings that had not been released. But it was a horrific fact when the finality of electrical recording stared all of these executives, all of these companies, all of these record producers in the face. Because suddenly there was a major problem. They had all of these stocks of recordings that were basically obsolete. And this upset them a lot. And there was a massive drive by many companies, Victor included, actually, until it was kind of forced into a corner, but to not upset the apple cart yet, because they had all these recordings. I mean, there's that wonderful story about Louis Sterling, who happened to get a hold of one of the test pressings of the electrical recordings. And he listened to it and his heart sank, because he knew it was all over. And they had just recorded all of these sets of records acoustically, and he knew that they were all going to be pretty much worthless. It's amazing when you think about that onset of electrical recording, what a massive change it was. I've often likened the idea of talking pictures. When we went to the silence to the talkies, all of a sudden the entire world changed. Because what had been status quo for many, many years was suddenly cast into the junk heap of time. And that's what happens with acoustic recording. Because as soon as one company put out electrics, every other company, except for Edison, looked at this and said, we look archaic and old-fashioned. And therefore, there was another push to hold it back as much as possible. And it was, to a degree. It was not until late 1925 that Victor officially announced electrical recording, although they had been producing them for a while. And, of course, Victor owned a part of Gramophone, the former G&T company, now called the Gramophone Company, HMV. And, of course, they waited until it was later to really, truly announce, but, of course, they released these electric records without saying a word. And the end result is, of course, they had to eventually accept the fact that the game was over with acoustic recording, and that what had been the mainstay of all of these companies had been relegated to the junk heap. That must have been really shocking for a lot of these old-timers who had dedicated their lives to recording. and suddenly the whole field changes. Pretty amazing when you think about it. But I think it's a very, very important point and a very, very important part of that transition from acoustic to electric, starting in 1925.